Now, let's dig in a little bit. First one, the petitio principii, begging the question. Now, we all use the expression begging the questions in everyday language with our friends, everyday discourse. No problems there. And how do we usually mean it? We usually mean it raises the question. So if you're just discussing something and you say, oh, how did things get so bad? Man, it begs the question. How did things get so bad? Or why did this happen? Or whatever. So begs the question in ordinary language really is you can think of it as saying raises the question or insists that we investigate this question. That's fine, but that's not how we're using it in philosophy, and that's not how I will use it, therefore, in this class. What I mean by begging the question when we're talking about fallacies now is it's not raises the question. No, actually, it's something different. So first things first, begging the question it has two forms. We'll look at the first form right now. Let's just start with an example. Think about something like this. Nobody is permitted to park here on the weekend since or because parking is only permitted here on the weekdays. That sounds like a little argument. It sounds like there's an inference going on. In a way, there is, but we've got to be careful about this. This is an example of begging the question. How so? Well, remember that an argument we talked about is a structure, and it's an ordered structure. So go back and review that if you've forgotten it, or go back and look at it if you haven't had a chance to see it yet. But let's rephrase this as an argument. So what's our premise? What's our conclusion? Well, it seems to be that it's reversed. This seems to be the conclusion. What's the conclusion? Nobody's here to park. Nobody can park here on the weekday because parking is only permitted, or park here on the weekend, sorry, because it's only permitted on the weekdays. So if we arrange this and put it in the form of an argument, which you'll be given some exercises on this. So we'll look at doing this, that you rearrange it in the standard form of an argument so that you can clarify all the relationships between the sentences and really start to critically think about it. So if we rearrange it, we'll get something like this. Parking is permitted only on weekdays. Therefore, parking is not permitted on weekends. This, when you look at it, is it valid? Is it sound? Well, forget the sound part for a second. Is it valid? Well, if this were true, could this be false? If you think about it, this is actually valid. But also, if you really look at it closely, what's going on here? Well, simply put, parking is permitted only on weekdays is pretty well just rephrased if you say parking is not permitted on weekends. So the reason why this is referred to as a begging of the question is simply that these two sentences are interchangeable. Right? In that sense, what we've got is that the conclusion of the argument is ultimately just a rephrasing of the premise. It's going to be valid because if the premises are true, or in this case, the premise, if it's true, then it's impossible to have a false conclusion because it's just a rephrasing. So think of it as if you just repeat yourself, right, and you say the same thing twice, you call the first sentence a premise and the second sentence a conclusion, and you're saying the same thing in both. Well, if the premise is true, the conclusion has to be true. That's valid. So a fallacy actually can be valid. That's why we don't say fallacies are purely counterfeit arguments. No, they're arguments. It's just that they're not good arguments. And remember, I stressed, finding a good argument is not just as easy as saying, is it valid? Is it sound? No, it's a little more complex. So this is valid. Is it sound? Well, you'd have to go out and check and see against the world, as we talked about. So this notion of begging the question, I said there were two forms. This is our first form. This is called the equivalency form. And think of it as just a rephrasing. This is an easy one to get tricked on. I see students can trick themselves. They'll think that they're making an argument by discussing something and then say therefore, and then just rephrasing something up here. And if you do that, you're going to get a little mark from me on your essay saying, a little note saying something like, you're just repeating yourself. And repeating yourself, it might have a valid structure, but it's by no means a good argument. So that's our first form. Now, let's check out the second form of petitio principii, or begging the question.